one application to rule them all. I assume that you came to my presentation because you have some of the same feelings that I have, that you kind of want to build a mobile application, and you can either go native or you can use HTML-based, but HTML is not really made for developing applications, because after all, it's a text format, it's a hyperlinked text, it's not screens, and writing code in JavaScript is, well, like, okay. So when I found out that Microsoft bought Xamarin, and they are going full force on having a real mobile platform for .NET, I went like, okay, this has to be possible with Java as well. And I gave it a try. Not quite voluntarily, I'll get to that. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you on an epic journey in my process of getting one application that runs on every platform that we currently are using. It won't involve volcanoes or people with large feet, but it might be interesting. Every epic journey, of course, has a hero, and in this case, the hero is me. I wrote my first computer program in 1983. That's quite a while ago. I think some people, well, it's an older audience this time. Anyhow, it was clear that I wanted to do software engineering, so I did the studies, graduated in 1993, and I've worked as a rent-a-nerd ever since. Self-employed in 2005, so in the 25 years that I've worked, I've done maybe like 100 projects. Currently, I'm working at Pink Rocade in the healthcare sector, but I've done military software and wall decoration, all range. And even though all the projects are different, there's always one constant, and that is that you have to register your time. There's always this moment on your day that you have to type, what have I done and how much hours have I spent on it. At Pink Rocade, we have a web application that's called Tuur, and Tuur, where we need to enter our hours. And I, of course, have one for myself. Being self-employed, I need to bill at the end of the month. And this application has the three most important parts for time registration. On the upper left, there is the date picker, where you can select what day you are working currently. It's automatically on today. That's always very practical. On the right side, there is a project tree, where you can select the project that you've worked on. And in the bottom left, center-ish, there is the timetable. So today, on this project, I worked 3 hours, and you can have a little description of what you've done. Now, this application is written as an applet. And people will start screaming, "You've written an applet?" Yes, I did. And I was quite pleased with it. I wrote it in 2006, and it has survived Internet Explorer 6, 7, 8, 9. You have to name this separately because they're so different each time. It survived Firefox from version 1.5 to 48. It survived the birth of Chrome, which was created in 2008. It survived Windows from XP to 10. And it did it all without a single code change. So, applets aren't that bad. However, the powers that be have decided that they are no longer supported, except on Internet Explorer. So it's the one moment in life that I like Internet Explorer. That's not a situation that can continue very long. So the interesting thing that the web application Tuur that we're using at Pink Rocade also only runs on Internet Explorer, but for totally different reasons. So I had to do something. Now, there is this other aspect as well, and that's that I'm the project lead of JFXtras. Now, we are in a JavaFX session. You know JFXtras? Any of you have done JavaFX before? So it's a little library that we've started. James was one of the founders, where we have some JavaFX controls, like the date picker and a calendar and some gauges and stuff. So this is my hobby project, and when I was at the decision point of whether to convert my applet to a desktop application, you know, write a class with a main method, create a connection and be done with it, or write a multi-platform JavaFX application, the choice was simple. You, of course, write a multi-platform JavaFX application, just because you can. So being in IT, I did set myself some goals. First of all, I, of course, wanted to know if this JavaFX on mobile actually worked, and if it was a lot of effort to get it running. And since it is on mobile, and yet JavaFX was made for desktop, I wanted to know if I can mobilize it, if I can make it touchy, preferably not doing it myself. And how is the performance? Is it slow or fast? And can I do it with a single code base? I mean, all the HTML solutions, they have like these specific parts where you can do stuff, and I really wanted just one code base. So, setting out on the first part of the journey, does it work? We're going to assume that the whole desktop part of JavaFX, that'll work. It will run on Windows, it will run on Apple. We're just going to focus on the mobile part. The first thing that you need to do, that you run into, is JavaFXPorts. And JavaFXPorts is an open source solution, open source project, maintained by Gluon, a Belgian company. And it basically is the part which makes the whole thing tick. It makes sure that JavaFX can run on mobile, both Android and iOS. And so what I did, I took the Hello World example, and as we all know, Hello World doesn't mean anything, so I added a text field and a date picker and a tree and a table. So I had the primary components of my time registration in my Hello World example. And if you start it on desktop, I will show this later, you get a screen showing a text field, the date picker. The date picker is from JFXtras, one of the things I wrote there, a table, and a tree. So, being very pleased with myself, I figured, now we can start this on Android. And the first thing I ran into was a big uh-oh. The build that for the Hello World just worked immediately failed with an invoke dynamic not supported. And then I went, oh yeah, that's right, we're talking about Android. And even though Android has 80% of the mobile market, it is based on a open source JVM implementation. Apache Dalvik, that's the open source JVM, uses a fundamentally different virtual machine than the one that Sun/Oracle has written. And Google chose that in order not to get into a legal battle with Sun, but then Oracle came along and now they're still in a legal battle. But Apache has stopped developing this virtual machine at Java 6. So all the stuff that you get with Java 7 and Java 8, being invoke dynamic, try with close, Lambda streams, are not available on Android. The combination of the virtual machine, Dalvik, and the class files that you get with Java, that's Harmony, simply is 5-6 years old. I'm not sure how old Java 6 is. This will go away with Android 7. Android 7 Nougat will use the OpenJDK, where Oracle and Google apparently have settled their differences. And as of the new version of Android, this will all go away. But that's still not out. Apparently, it will also be backwards compatible. But as it stands, there is still a problem with Android using Java 6 code. So, luckily, there is a solution. It's called Retrolambda. And what it does is I need to read my notes. It's a post-processing of class files. So it takes a class file compiled with Java 7 or Java 8 and tries to see if it can find a invoke dynamic or a try with close, and simply replaces the whole code with something that's Java 6 compatible. It does it only for your current project. So my Hello World example with the edit controls is compiled, is retrolambda'd and pushed out to Android. But while compiling, it detects that my date picker, which comes from JFXtras, is not retrolambda'd, and therefore the invoke dynamic error. So the first thing I had to do was retrolambda JFXtras, and I also use MIC layout. I'm not sure, are there any Swing developers? Yeah, you use MIC layout by Michael Greff? No? Okay. We ported it to JavaFX as well. It also needs to be retrolambda'd. And when I had those two set up, then the Hello World, extended Hello World application ran on my Android tablet. Okay. There is a thing that you don't see immediately, but being on Java 6 means that JavaFX itself is not available, because JavaFX became part of the JDK somewhere halfway Java 7, and is officially part of the JDK since Java 8. So JavaFX itself is not present on Android. What the JavaFXPorts does is it rips it out of the runtime jar, retrolambda's it, and then includes it in the application and pushes it out. And the JavaFX team at Oracle has agreed not to use the Streams API because that can't be retrolambda'd. Okay, so every now and then we get the oh really slide. That's the point where I wanted to show you something that I said actually works. So what we have here is, and I didn't need to zoom because the resolution is so incredibly high. You can read this probably, huh? Yeah. I wanted to show you something else. Not that one, this one here. Yeah. So this is a typical JavaFX application. I'm going to show you this because we're going to get back to this a little bit later on. Everything extends application, and then you have a start where you have a scene or stage, and in the stage you can add children. In this case, I add a text field, and I add the calendar picker, and the hour table, and the project tree. I'm binding the calendar picker to the text field, and then there is a little bit of sizing going on, and then the whole thing should show. So if I start this, step 1, does it run? Then you get the application. Okay. Now, this works on desktop. The thing is, does it also work on mobile? And next to me is my dear old little Nexus 7, and it's from 2012. So this is an old hardware, and I use it especially so we can see that if it performs on this, then it'll perform on modern hardware. And I have the step 1 here as well. So if I start this, then of course you have the load delay because the whole Java thing needs to be loaded. And it starts. And if I start tapping, then it's fast. You can edit, get in there. There's no delay. It's responsive. You probably wouldn't want to write a game with it, maybe, but it's for business applications pretty okay. Okay. So given that it works, I'm going to kill that application here and gone. We came to the next phase of our little project. Given that the JavaFX application runs on mobile, but with a desktop look, can we make it touchy? Now again, being lazy, we're IT, I would prefer to have someone else do that for me. So I started looking at what's available in the open source in forms of making a JavaFX application touch-enabled. And one of the first things that you come along is the Flatter project by GUI Garage. And what it does, it tries to mimic, and people have corrected me on this, the Microsoft Metro look. Not the Google Material, but the Microsoft Metro look. So when you add it to the project, and I already arranged the controls so it looked a little bit more like the applet that I've written, then you get this. If you then apply this or start this on Android, then things become very large. We just saw the example where the text field and the date picker were next to each other. And this one was very big. I also had to Retrolambda it. So I suspect it was developed on iOS. And that works fine. And with a retina display. So they sized the buttons too big. Also, if you look at the bottom left, the table where I'm editing there is still blue. And the buttons are red. So the whole skinning doesn't look like it's complete, it's harmonic. So even though you have something that's touch enabled, it doesn't look real polished. You can do that, of course. You can start twiddling with CSS and then it will look better. But the whole idea of having a library is that you don't have to twiddle, that it's working on its own. So, nah, not really. Another open source project is called JFoenix. And JFoenix is impressive. It has great looking controls, animated stuff, little effects and shadows. It's truly a well polished library. The only problem is that it has separate controls. It does not skin the existing controls, but it has separate controls written that you can use. Also, it only has the basic controls like the button and the checkbox and the radio button, but not the table and the tree. And I just happen to have to use those two. So if you look at my test application, we're going to show you the JFoenix controls in a bit. If you look at my test application, then of all the controls that you can see, only the 5 buttons, the 5 purple ones, are JFoenixed, because the table and the tree are not, and the date packer is from JFXtras. It uses the standard controls, and those are not skinned. So as nice as they are, it doesn't really help. And then the open source well dries up. So the next step means that you have to go commercial. Gluon Mobile, with the Glisten library, I have no idea where that name came from, also have reskinned all the standard controls. But not only that, so on the left side in the middle, that's the button. They've also added all kinds of specific controls that you can use for on mobile, like a slider from the left, or that you can pull down and refresh. And there is the plus button on the bottom right, which is typical mobile UI. So when you include it in the project and you start it, it immediately feels polished and complete, and that you think like, okay, that's great. There is a drawback. They use the mobile logic, so you have to write a different style of application. The extend application that we've did, that you saw in the initial version, where our added controls are replaced with activities, similar to Android. Views, they call it in Gluon. So if you choose Gluon and the library, you have to adhere to their architecture. Now, the minute you put that into your application, it looks like this. So the controls, the date picker from JFXtras is being skinned. The buttons are being skinned. The only thing I added here was that next to the middle tab in the center, there are some Font Awesome FX icons. But this is exactly the same application as we saw on the desktop version. Yeah. Oh, really? Yes, really. First, let's take a peek at the flatter look. So if we start the second one here. Then this is the one with the reskinning, but it takes my whole screen. Now you can't, of course, see it in perspective, but it's way too big. It doesn't need to be that big to make it touchable. So that is not too interesting. And I wanted to show you the JFoenix controls. Okay, so these are the JFoenix controls, and they're actually very beautifully styled. There are little animations going on. If you take a checkbox, then with a little twist in the box, it's really nicely done. But this is all there is. There's no table, there's no tree, and it doesn't replace the existing controls. Okay. And then this is the version we saw when you use JFoenix in your application. Only these 5 buttons are replaced. Okay, so that again resulted in a decision point. Either I chose to manually touchify all the standard controls using JFoenix, because if one writes such nice checkboxes, you should be using them, or you had to go commercial, because that's the only viable alternative. I decided to go commercial. Now, it did help that Gluon gave me a free license, because otherwise I wouldn't have done it. For my own time registration, I would have switched back to my applet and wrote it as a desktop application. But because they knew what I was doing, they gave me a license. And I didn't want to start JFXPorts Mobile just yet. It's a little bit too much work. So, having decided on what technology and what libraries to use, we come to the third part, and that's the rule them all. It basically means that we want to have one application that fits on all screens. Now, mobile has some special UX going on with the way you swipe and touch, and personally I feel that actually is quite natural. I often see myself when I'm on the desktop trying to swipe with the mouse, because it's much more natural than finding that scroll bar at the bottom. The JFoenix website, where you have the program, also has a scroll bar at the bottom, and I keep swiping, and oh no, I have to scroll down and then use the scroll button. So mobile first, from a UX perspective, is, I think, a very good approach. So that's what I decided to do. I'm going to write it for mobile and make sure that it also runs on desktop. Now, given that we're talking about all screens, that can be pretty different in size. You have the huge desktop, the tablets, the phablets, somewhere between phones and tablets, the phones, the watches, maybe even. And if you want to run the same application on all those different screens, then you're coming into the area of responsive layout. And the web already has solved this. One of the more better-known implementations is Twitter Bootstrap. And it has defined screen types based on the sizes of the screen. So anything above 1024 is desktop, and somewhere between 1024 and 768, that's a tablet. And in such a way, they've tried to categorize screen sizes based on the width. And given the size of the screen, they're assigning classes to the nodes in the web page. And so you can have CSS that is automatically adapting to the screen size. Again, the guys from GUI Garage have decided that they thought that was a good idea, and they've written responsive FX. And basically, it does exactly the same. It takes the size of the screen, the width of the screen of the device, and then categorizes it and assigns classes to all the nodes in the render tree of JavaFX. And JavaFX also uses CSS, not for layout, just for styling. But you can then change font size and all kinds of stuff. So I like that, included it in the project, and started it on desktop, and it worked great. And I went like, oh, look at that. And then I started it on Android, and my screen went black. And I waited, and I waited, and I have no idea what it was doing, but I suspect that assigning those classes to the nodes makes the processor on Android simply not finish ever. Maybe next week somewhere, but it didn't come back. I left it on for an hour, and it stayed black. So assigning those CSS classes to the nodes is too intensive, too CPU intensive. So I figured, well, maybe we can do it differently. Instead of assigning CSS to the nodes, why not replace the CSS file? That's only one action. Then the CSS engine can just re-render everything and be done with it. So I started developing JFXtra's responsive layout. And basically what it does is replace the CSS file based on the size. But not only that, in CSS for web, you can actually do some layout. I mean, they're now trying to introduce the flex grid to completely port layout to CSS. Does anyone? I always have a fight with trying to lay out stuff on a website with CSS. I'm still using tables. Yeah. So it's a good thing I'm not doing that. So I added a second aspect, and that's depending on the size of the screen, the layout also chooses what layout to use. So it replaces the CSS file, and it changes the layout. So what you're seeing here are two screenshots of the same application. The left one is tablet size, where it uses the same layout as I have on my applet, with on the left side a date picker and a tree and a table. But if you shrink it, then at a certain point it says, okay, now we're too small, and it changes the layout to a tab-based layout. In the smaller screen on the left side, you see 4 tabs. Basically, that is the date picker, the tree, and the table, and the little total list in the center. So the algorithm has a number of layouts, a number of CSS files, and it tries to use the biggest version that's smaller than the screen that we're currently on. Oh, really? Yes, now it gets interesting. So first, let me show you. And this is the part where the 1024 screen size will come into play. But I played around with these screen sizes, so you see that it's not quite fitting here at the bottom left, but have a look at it. So given the size of the screen, it currently decides to use the tablet layout. And if I make it smaller, then at a certain point, it will say, okay, now I have to switch to the tabbed-based layout. Okay. How that is working, how you configure this, is if I go here, then what you see here, and this is the part where things are different from the normal JavaFX application. This is a Gluon Mobile application, so it doesn't extend application, but mobile application. And then you add 2 views, the home view and the login view. If you start the application, you first come in the login view. And once you go through that, you come, this is the home view. And over here, it says that the login view is the initial view to open. So I have 2 views, home and login. And the interesting one is the home view, of course. And on the home view, there is the responsive layout. And if you look here, let me maximize this. Then on the responsive layout, I'm clearing all the layouts because I'm not sure what it's been doing before. And then I'm setting 3 layouts. If the tablet is at least, the screen is at least the width of what is considered a tablet, use the desktop layout. If the width is at least the size of a phone, use the phone layout. And the singularity is, of course, 0 in size, then use the empty layout. The desktop layout uses MacPane and has the logo and the calendar picker and the card and the project view. The phone layout creates a tabbed pane where for each tab the component is added. And the empty view is just saying no layout. So basically, if you make it small enough, first connect, then first it switches to the phone layout, and then when you're getting really small, it says, okay, now I have no idea what you want to do. I can't render this anymore. Okay. So that's the layout part. But what you're also seeing is that here, let me close this. Here there are CSS files. Responsive has the basic settings, what color to use for the list spinner and what color to use for the weekend label and the week number and all the things that are standard. And then you have the specific versions for a tablet where I'm fiddling with the arrows in the date picker, so they become a little bit bigger so you can press them. Or with the phablet size, I'm making them even a bit more bigger. But on the desktop, I'm not doing anything with the arrows because then you can click with the mouse. So these files are being replaced. Now, to show you that it is happening, what I'm going to do is change this color to blue. This is the color of the arrows in the list spinner, and the list spinners are the ones in the date picker showing the year and the month. Okay. So if I'm starting the application again, connect. So they're blue now, and if I'm pulling it a bit bigger, I can't. Screen size fun. Let's see. Play along, please. Okay. Yeah. Can't pull past it. So normally if you pull it bigger, you would see that it turn white again. What can I do? I could switch to the tablet view maybe. Okay. You have to forgive me on this one. Okay. So adding a new layout. It's quite simple. So suppose we want to do something in between. It's already on tablet. Maybe use phablet. So I'm going to copy this layout method. And say phablet. And then I'm going to add a row here and tell it that when it is at blood. Okay. So if we're now going to resize, then it should decide that somewhere in between it's phablet layout, and then it's back to the phone layout. So it's quite simple to do. Okay. So far so good. And I was pretty pleased with myself. I'm going to first show you this on Android. Yeah. That's this one. So it has decided that on my 7-inch Nexus in landscape mode that it should be using the phone layout. And you can press here and you can enter some text. Oh, this is a number. Some text here. And it's pretty responsive, no problem. Now, there is, of course, one issue. This is based on the web way of determining the screen size, but web always assumes that it has an unlimited vertical scroll. And these screens do not. So even though the principle works, I'm still not pleased because doing this on a phone, which is in landscape and deciding to use the phone layout, is totally different from using a tablet in portrait mode. It has the same screen size maybe, but you can have a totally different layout. So even though this conceptually works for this application, the responsive layout code, I feel, still needs something with orientation. And that's something that the web doesn't provide. So I'm going to port this over to JFXtras and make it a true layout, but something with the orientation still has to click. I'm not convinced this is the end situation. So I was pretty pleased with myself. It worked. And I'm going to move this out of the way again. So. And my end goal was reached. I could type my hours on my phone and on the tablet and on the PC. And then I stumbled upon something that I found was very interesting. And that's called JPro. And what JPro does is replace the rendering logic of JavaFX with a web server. So JavaFX basically does the same as React does. I'm not sure if anyone knows that. And that it has a render tree with nodes, and the code configures the render tree, and then there's a render engine taking that tree and pushing it out onto Direct 3D or OpenGL or whatever you're using on your hardware. And JPro simply ripped out the render engine and put in a web server. And the web server renders the rendering tree as SVG. So what you're seeing now is the desktop application. It's the same application with the JPro render engine, and now it runs in the browser without a plugin. So if I do an inspect, then what you will see, I hope, inspect, are SVG statements. So the whole UI is rendered in SVG, and it's functional. Same code base, and you can type, and you can even, but again, screen resolution, if you make it bigger, then at some point it really should be, come on. I'm not sure why this isn't working. It also will switch to the other layout because it's just a screen size.
You can't resize beyond the dimension of your screen.
Yeah.
Maybe disconnect the...
Don't say scary stuff. You know how much cables there are here. Don't disconnect. So if you pull the browser bigger, then it will switch to the other, because JavaFX doesn't know that it's running in the browser. It's just the output of its render tree. So I was pretty pleased that I got full circle. I started with an applet in the browser, and then through the desktop, through mobile, I'm back in the browser running my same application, with the only difference being the two layout methods in the home view class. Okay. So JPro in a browser. Of course, you want to know, does iOS run as well? Yes, it does, but this is not an Apple. And I could show you a emulator running OS X with an emulator inside running iOS on a mobile phone. Performance would not be quite what you might expect. So I'm going to leave you with a screenshot. There was one thing that didn't work. It completely worked. The only thing were the two icons on the top right. For some reason, Font Awesome didn't render the two icons. But if I switched to a different icon set, then it worked. So that was the only issue I had running this application on iOS. That said, does JavaFX work at all on mobile? Yes, it does. How much effort? Well, retrolambdaing is a problem. If you can get to the source code, then you can do it. I had to convince Michael Greff, the owner of Mirpain, to not use that one stream API call that he tried out just for fun. So otherwise you can't retrolambda it. What mobile UI libraries exist? Well, really only JFoenix, but it's incomplete. So at the moment, Gluon is the only mature option. Can the app be controlled using touch? Yes, but you need special scanning. The standard controls are too small, too fine-grained. How's the performance? Well, on my 2012 Nexus 7, it was pretty smooth. So anything from this year, it will probably fly. And can you do it in a single code base? Yes. Desktop, mobile, and the browser. The last one was a surprise. So that was my journey I made in the last few months. I was pleased to share that with you. Thank you for your time. Any questions at the end of the day? Yeah?
How does the backend work, the communication? Is it also possible on different devices in one code base?
Yeah. So the applet uses Hessian, which was very popular in 2006, and I'm still using Hessian. So that was no problem. It's very compatible. So at the end, Gandalf cat, of course. Thank you.